Open this safe, and $200 million is yours. For a brief second, the room went silent. Then it exploded with laughter. Not polite laughter. Not surprised laughter. Mocking laughter. Crystal chandeliers shimmered from the ceiling of the grand ballroom, reflecting golden light across marble floors and polished glass tables. The wealth in the room was almost blinding. Diamond necklaces sparkled. Designer suits fit perfectly tailored shoulders. Expensive watches flashed as hands lifted champagne glasses. This wasn't just a party. It was a gathering of power. Bankers who control markets. Tech CEOs who owned empires. Politicians who shaped laws. And at the center of it all stood Victor Langford. Tall, confident, impeccably dressed in a custom black tuxedo. A man used to being the smartest and richest person in any room. Beside him stood the object of tonight's entertainment. A massive steel safe, nearly 6 feet tall, reinforced hinges, digital keypad glowing blue, a biometric scanner built into the side, and above it, a sleek mechanical dial, old-school engineering mixed with modern technology. Victor rested one hand casually on top of it, like a king showing off his throne. It's protected by a custom encryption lock, he said with a smirk. Designed by the best engineers in the world. He paused, letting the suspense build. No one has opened it in under 10 minutes. The crowd murmured approvingly. Some nodded impressed. Others already knew the safe had become one of Victor's favorite party tricks, a way to show that genius could be bought. Then something shifted. Victor's eyes slowly moved across the room, past the VIP guests, past the investors, toward the back, near the catering tables. There, standing slightly apart from the crowd, was a 17-year-old boy in a simple black suit. It wasn't designer. It wasn't perfectly tailored, but it was clean, pressed, worn with quiet dignity. His name was Elijah Carter. He wasn't supposed to be noticed. His mother worked in that mansion. She had worked there for over a decade, polishing floors that reflected people who never learned her name, cleaning rooms filled with art worth more than her lifetime salary. Tonight, she stood near the kitchen entrance in her uniform, trying to stay invisible. Victor tilted his head slightly, pretending to think. Then he chuckled. Maybe the maid's son wants to try? The words floated through the air like smoke. The laughter returned, louder this time. Some guests covered their smiles. Others openly grinned. A few looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. All eyes turned toward Elijah. Heat rushed to his face. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He could feel the weight of their stares. He could feel the unspoken message. You don't belong here. For a split second, doubt whispered in his mind. But then he remembered late nights at a tiny desk, old computers taken apart and rebuilt, online engineering forums, security system tutorials, hours of practice while the world slept. He lifted his chin. He didn't look at the floor. He didn't look at his mother. He looked straight at the safe. Then he stepped forward. The polished marble echoed beneath his shoes. I'll try, he said calmly. The laughter grew louder, echoing against the crystal chandeliers. They thought this was a joke. Entertainment. A billionaire's harmless humiliation game. But as Elijah reached the safe and placed his hand gently against the cold steel, the room had no idea. Everything was about to change. Elijah wasn't supposed to be there. When the invitation for the mansion's anniversary gala was announced to staff, Denise Carter had already made up her mind. Her son would stay home, safe, away from the polished marble floors and sharper-than-glass smiles. She knew this world too well. Please, Elijah, she had said that afternoon while buttoning her uniform. It's not a place for us. Not because they didn't deserve to be there, but because she understood how easily people with money could make others feel small. Denise had worked for Victor Langford for 12 long years. 12 years of arriving before sunrise. 12 years of polishing floors so clean they reflected chandeliers like mirrors. 12 years of wiping fingerprints off glass tables worth more than her yearly salary. She had memorized which guests liked sparkling water and which preferred still. She knew which rooms needed fresh flowers and which doors were never to be opened. But despite all those years, she remained what many wealthy guests barely noticed. Part of the background. Invisible. Yet at night, In their small two-bedroom apartment across town, the story was different. At night, Denise saw something the billionaires couldn't see. She saw brilliance. While other teenagers scrolled through social media, Elijah sat at a second-hand desk crowded with wires and circuit boards. The desk lamp flickered sometimes, but it didn't stop him. Old radios from thrift stores became mini communication devices. Broken laptops discarded by neighbors came back to life under his hands. He watched free engineering lectures online, pausing and rewinding until he understood every detail. Security systems fascinated him the most. How do they keep people out? He once asked. Denise didn't always understand the technical words he used, but she understood his focus, his hunger to learn. They couldn't afford college prep programs. They couldn't hire private tutors. Every dollar Denise earned went toward rent, groceries, and keeping the lights on. Still, Elijah never complained. When the Wi-Fi in their building went down, he fixed it in under 15 minutes. When a neighbor's phone stopped working, he repaired it using spare parts. He didn't just see problems. He saw patterns, solutions, possibilities. And tonight, as Denise stood near the kitchen doors of the Langford mansion, her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the music from the ballroom. She saw that same look on her son's face. Calm, focused, unshaken. It was the look he had when he solved a complex coding puzzle at 2 a.m. The look he had when something challenged him instead of intimidating him. But this wasn't their apartment. This wasn't the neighbor asking for help. This was Victor Langford's world. A world of billion-dollar deals and fragile egos. A world where pride mattered more than fairness. And Victor Langford was not a man who liked to lose. Denise's fingers tightened around the edge of the serving tray she was holding. If Elijah failed, they would laugh. If he succeeded, she wasn't sure what would happen. Because sometimes, in rooms filled with power, proving people wrong doesn't just embarrass them. It threatens them. And tonight, her son had just stepped into the center of that room, into the spotlight, into a challenge that was never meant for him to win. Denise closed her eyes for one brief second, not in fear, but in silent prayer, because she knew something the crowd didn't. They saw a Maid's son. She saw a mind that never stopped working. And minds like that, they don't back down. Elijah walked up to the safe. This time, the laughter didn't follow him. It faded, slowly, like background noise being turned down. The closer he got, the bigger the safe looked. Under the golden chandelier light, its steel surface reflected faint shadows of the crowd behind him. It wasn't just a box with a lock. It was a statement, a monument to wealth, to power, to control. Up close, Elijah could see the details clearly now. A biometric scanner embedded on the right side. A digital keypad glowing soft blue. Above it, a heavy mechanical dial, precision engineered, old-school craftsmanship blended with modern encryption. This wasn't designed to be guessed. It was designed to intimidate. Victor Langford crossed his arms confidently, adjusting his cufflinks. Clock starts now. A massive LED screen behind them lit up. 60. The red numbers glowed brightly against the dark ballroom walls. A soft murmur rippled through the audience. 59, 58, 57. Elijah didn't rush. He didn't touch anything at first. He simply observed. His eyes moved slowly across the keypad. Most people would have started pressing numbers randomly under pressure. But pressure sharpened him. He noticed faint smudge patterns on certain digits, subtle oil marks left behind by repeated use. Not obvious, not careless, but visible to someone trained to look. He filed the numbers away in his mind. Then he placed his fingers lightly on the mechanical dial and rotated it. Slowly, carefully. Click. He stopped. He rotated again. Click. Each tiny sound echoed louder in his head than the crowd's whispers. He remembered a free lecture he had watched months ago about mechanical tolerances, how even high-end systems had microscopic inconsistencies in resistance when aligned correctly. 45 seconds. He crouched slightly, examining the safe's lower edge. From a distance, it looked flawless. But up close, there was a nearly invisible flaw, a slight misalignment where the outer casing met the reinforced door. So small most people would never notice. But Elijah did, because he wasn't looking at the safe as a symbol. He was looking at it as a system, and every system has weakness. The crowd began whispering louder now. 30 seconds. Victor's confident smile tightened slightly. Elijah stood up. He pressed 4 numbers. Deliberately. Not randomly. Numbers that showed more where than others. Not necessarily the code, but likely part of it. Then he rotated the dial again. Slower this time. Feeling the resistance. Stopping at the subtle points where the internal locking pins felt lighter. 20 seconds. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. 10 seconds. Victor uncrossed his arms. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. 5 seconds. Elijah placed his thumb on the biometric scanner. Nothing happened. A sharp gasp swept through the crowd. The screen flashed. 4, 3. Victor's smirk began to return. 2. But Elijah didn't move away. He shifted his thumb slightly to the left, adjusting pressure and angle. He remembered something else. Some older biometric systems calibrated based on initial firmware alignment. If not updated properly, they could misread direct placement but accept offset pressure. 1. The scanner flickered. For a split second, nothing. Then, green light. A sharp mechanical click echoed through the ballroom. The heavy steel door unlocked, and slowly, it swung open. The timer froze. 0:02. Total time? 58 seconds. No one clapped. No one spoke. The entire ballroom stood frozen. The same people who had laughed just a minute ago now stared at the open safe like they had witnessed something impossible. Elijah stepped back quietly. Calm. Composed. The room that once felt filled with noise was now completely silent. Because in 58 seconds, everything had changed. You could hear a glass drop somewhere in the hall. The sharp sound of crystal hitting marble echoed unnaturally loud in the silence. No music. No laughter. No whispers now. Just shock. Victor Langford stood frozen in front of the open safe. The heavy steel door hung wide, its locking bolts fully retracted. The green scanner light still glowed softly, as if confirming what no one in the room wanted to believe. Inside were neatly stacked legal documents, sealed envelopes, and polished gold bars engraved with Langford Holdings, symbolic proof of the $200 million challenge he loved to boast about at parties. It had always been a performance, a demonstration of superiority, an expensive prop that proved his brilliance. But no one had ever opened it before. Until now. Victor's shoulders, once squared with confidence, slowly dropped. The smirk that had lived comfortably on his face minutes earlier disappeared completely. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved from the open safe to Elijah. That's impossible, one executive muttered under his breath. Another guest stepped closer, squinting at the keypad as if it might reveal a trick. A few people even glanced behind the safe, searching for hidden wires or some kind of illusion. There was none. This was real. Elijah took a small step back, giving space, not celebrating, not smiling, not gloating. Just calm. Respectful. You didn't upgrade the secondary biometric calibration after the firmware patch, he explained evenly. His voice wasn't loud, but in the silence, everyone heard it. It created a slight delay in the scanner's response time. When I shifted pressure, it recognized the stored print alignment. Several guests blinked, trying to process what he had just said. It's a common oversight, Elijah added gently, especially when firmware updates are installed without recalibrating hardware sensitivity. The words didn't sound like they belonged to a teenager in a worn suit. They sounded like they belonged in a boardroom. The room stared at him differently now. Moments ago, he had been entertainment. A joke. The maid's son. Now, people were looking at him like they were seeing something rare. Not a servant's child. Not an outsider. But a mind. Victor finally moved. He stepped forward slowly, each polished shoe tapping against the marble with controlled precision. His eyes remained locked on Elijah. For the first time in years, he wasn't smiling. There was no arrogance in his expression now. Only calculation. How? Victor asked quietly. Did you learn that? The question wasn't mocking this time. It was genuine. Elijah shrugged slightly, almost shyly. Public research forums, he said. Engineering communities share a lot of case studies. Free PDFs, open source security discussions. I practice on old systems when I can find them. He paused, and trial and error. A murmur moved through the crowd again, but this time it wasn't laughter. It was respect. Across the ballroom, Denise Carter stood near the kitchen entrance, one hand covering her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. She remembered the flickering desk lamp in their apartment. The nights she had fallen asleep on the couch while Elijah stayed awake studying diagrams. The mornings she woke up early for work and saw him still reviewing notes before school. All those nights, all those sacrifices, every overtime shift, every ignored insult, every moment she felt invisible in this mansion. They weren't invisible anymore. Victor glanced back at the open safe one more time, then returned his gaze to Elijah. For the first time that evening, the power dynamic in the room had shifted, and everyone could feel it, because the richest man in the city had just been outsmarted. Not by money, not by influence, but by a teenager who had nothing except knowledge. And now, no one in that ballroom would ever look at him the same way again. The next morning, the video was everywhere. Clipped, edited, replayed from 10 different angles. Teen opens Billionaire's safe in 60 seconds. The headline spread across social media like wildfire. By sunrise, it was trending. By noon, it was global. News anchors called it a once-in-a-decade genius moment. Tech bloggers analyzed the footage frame by frame, breaking down Elijah's movements, the pause at the dial, the shift of his thumb, the calm under pressure. Comment sections exploded. Some called him a prodigy. Some called him proof that talent exists everywhere. And some simply said, "This gave me chills." Phones started ringing before breakfast. Local reporters first, then national networks. By the afternoon, tech companies had reached out offering internships. Cybersecurity firms sent formal invitations for private meetings. Scholarship foundations asked for transcripts and recommendation letters. Elite universities, schools Denise had only ever seen in movies, offered full rides, full tuition, housing, research grants. The world that once seemed locked behind gates and guarded doors suddenly opened all at once. 3 days later, Victor Langford held a press conference. The same ballroom, the same chandeliers, but the energy was different. Cameras lined the walls. Journalists filled the seats. And standing at the podium was the billionaire himself, composed, measured, but noticeably humbler. Elijah Carter earned the $200 million challenge. Victor announced, his voice steady. But more importantly, he earned my respect. The statement echoed across live broadcasts. Instead of handing over literal cash, which would have created legal and financial chaos, Victor revealed something far more strategic. He had established a long-term tech investment fund in Elijah's name. The fund would cover Elijah's education at any institution he chose. It would connect him with top engineers and mentors in cybersecurity. And most importantly, it would give him ownership stakes in emerging security startups funded through Langford Holdings. It wasn't charity. It was partnership. Reporters turned their cameras toward Elijah, who stood calmly beside his mother. But here's what no one expected. When asked what he wanted to do first, Elijah didn't talk about cars, or houses, or luxury. He adjusted the microphone slightly and said something simple. "I'd like to create a scholarship program for children of service workers." The room fell quiet. He continued, steady and sincere. "Talent doesn't depend on income. Opportunity does." Within hours, that quote was everywhere. Printed on news graphics, shared across social media, turned into motivational posts and classroom discussions. People weren't just inspired by what he did. They were moved by why he did it. The scholarship program launched within months, funded jointly by Victor's Foundation and private donors inspired by the story. Children of housekeepers, drivers, janitors, kitchen staff, students who had big minds but small bank accounts. They now had a door open for them too. As for Denise Carter, she never returned to cleaning the Langford mansion. Victor personally thanked her at the press conference, acknowledging her years of service. Shortly after, she officially retired. Not quietly, not invisibly, but with dignity. And Elijah? He didn't become famous as the Maid's son. That label faded quickly. Instead, he became known as the young innovator who challenged assumptions about where brilliance comes from. He gave talks at universities, advised startups before he even finished college. And every time he stood on a stage, he remembered that night. The laughter, the doubt, the safe. Because sometimes intelligence doesn't announce itself loudly. Sometimes it doesn't wear designer suits or sit in the front row. Sometimes it stands quietly in the back of the room, watching, learning, waiting for one chance, one opportunity, one safe to open. And when that moment comes, it doesn't take years. It doesn't take permission. It only takes 60 seconds to change everything.